Good evening. Before I call our meeting to order this evening, I'd like to announce the resignation of New Canaan Board of Education member Carl Gardner. Carl's resignation is due to a permanent relocation out of state, and it took effect on October 1st. On behalf of the board and New Canaan Public Schools, I would like to extend our sincere thanks and appreciation for the contributions Carl has made to our schools and our community over the past 2 years. Carl's interest in financial analysis, data-driven decision-making, and a strong sense of purpose and commitment to achieving the best outcome for all students made him a valued member of our board and community. He always brought his thoughtful, honest approach and well-researched perspectives to enrich our discussions. We wish Carl our very best in his new home and next endeavors and appreciate his years of service to our community. As a board, we are currently considering options for filling this vacancy and will share additional information at a future meeting. Thank you. So I'd like to call to order the October 4th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First tonight is to approve the minutes from the September 20th meeting. Can I have a motion? Bob, second. Brendan, all in favor? Abstentions? Okay, Sherry and Jen abstain. All others in favor. Next is to review and approve the agenda. I'd like to propose just a minor change in the order of our agenda this evening to move comments, the second round of comments from the public and the announcements and future business ahead of our executive session. We want to be able to give anyone an opportunity to address the board before we move into executive session. So with that, is there a motion to approve the agenda? Jen, second. Sherry, all in favor? Okay, thank you. All in favor. Next up is comments from the public. The Board of Education expects mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among all individuals on school property, at school events, and in communications with district employees. The board encourages positive communication and discourages volatile, hostile, or aggressive actions. The board seeks public cooperation with this endeavor. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. I'd also like to note that no public comments have been received via email today. Is there anyone wishing to address the board this evening? Okay.
Hi. Heather Moore, 10 Snowberry Lane. Over the years, you've heard me speak regarding the need to change to healthier school start times several times. My philosophy has always been, don't make it personal. Focus on the facts. It's not about me. It's about the health and wellness of all of our students. Tonight, however, I'm changing it up and I'm making it personal. Back in 2017, my then 9th grade daughter spoke at a board meeting to share her experience with 7:30 start times. School mornings are the worst, she said. I try to get to bed by 10 every night, but lay awake for hours. My mom drives me to school so that I can get an extra 20 minutes of sleep. I'm too tired for breakfast, but really need my coffee. I've dozed off on the school floor many times, usually while leaning on the shoulder of another napping friend. I'm exhausted all the time. That 9th grader went on to find success at our high school through the help of many of these people, all while dealing with high stress levels, frequent illness, and overwhelming fatigue. I worried about her every day, yet somehow she managed to persevere. Fast forward to today. She's a freshman at the University of Maryland. She won their Presidential Scholarship Award and is majoring in chemical engineering. Her course load is pretty intense. A few nights ago, I asked her how she was doing with all the change, a new home, a new set of friends, being independent, and taking a lot of really hard classes. Her response was, compared to high school, it's a piece of cake. My class schedule feels natural, and I feel healthier than ever. Let that sink in. My class schedule feels natural, and I feel healthier than ever. As a parent, I can finally stop worrying about her every day. As a district, we need to think first and foremost about the health of our students and focus on getting this done without any further delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports and recognition. First this evening, we have a legislative update from CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. Tonight, we have with us Ms. Patrice McCarthy. Ms. McCarthy is the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, where she has served for 30 years. She is a graduate of Mount Holyoke College and the University of Connecticut School of Law. She has served as chairman of the National School Boards Association Council of School Attorneys and is past president of the Connecticut School Attorneys Council. Patrice is an evaluator of American and international schools abroad for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. In 2007, she received the Federation Member Distinguished Service Award from the National School Boards Association. She's been a frequent presenter at national, regional, and state conferences and has represented school boards on numerous task forces. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I look forward to our discussion. I think what would probably be most helpful is if I begin with talking a little bit about the legislative process, how issues are dealt with at the state level that then have an impact at the local level, how you as a board can impact that process, and then talk about a few specific examples, but primarily from the most recent legislative session. And I'm very much hope that if you have any questions, you'll feel free to pose them at any time.
Thank you.
So there are certainly a number of state actions that impact our local districts. One of the responsibilities of CABE is to keep local boards apprised when those issues are coming up, and we'll talk a little more about that later, but also to advocate both at the State Board of Education and at the legislature based on positions that the membership has adopted. So we try to make sure that legislators hear the voice of local school boards through CABE collectively, but also make sure that you have the information you need so that you as an individual board can communicate with your own legislators as well as with all members of the General Assembly, particularly members of the Education Committee. Now, the State Board of Education and the State Department of Education certainly issues a lot of guidance to local school districts, and superintendents during COVID, I think, are getting almost daily communications from the department, and we get copies of those as well. But unlike Texas, for example, our State Board of Education does not adopt textbooks that are required for every district in the state. So while it may seem at times that there's a lot of state oversight compared to other states, we in fact do have still a lot of local control, a lot of local opportunity to influence education for the students in each individual community. Now, the legislature operates through task forces that meet in the interim between legislative sessions, and then through the process where bills are introduced. They go through the committee process. The ones we're usually most concerned with always go through the Education Committee, but there will be bills in the Transportation Committee and Labor and Employment Committee, as well as the Appropriations Committee, where the money decisions are made. How we communicate with you is through what we call advocacy highlights. So anytime there's a legislative issue, you get an email letting you know about it. Even if as an association we may not have a position on it, there are issues that impact individual boards or groups of boards that they need to know about. We have a delegate assembly every year in November where the positions of the association are adopted and the priorities are then set for the upcoming legislative session. But we monitor every single piece of legislation to determine if it has an impact on public education. And then we let our districts know about it. We operate through a state relations committee that is actually the committee of school board members. Any board member is welcome to be a part of that committee, and they actually set our legislative priorities for each session. We have legislative breakfasts around the state, and we have an annual Day on the Hill. Last year it was a very virtual Day on the Hill. Actually, March 13th of 2020 was our last official CABE activity before the basically shutdown of many things for many weeks and months. You as a local board, when you get communications or learn about legislation, you can take action in a variety of ways. You can, for instance, some boards adopt a resolution on an issue that is a particular concern to your district that you have consensus among the board members on, and then communicate that to your legislators. It's also very helpful if you communicate that to us, because as your advocates at the Capitol, that way when we're talking to legislators, we know we can say, well, the New Canaan board has already communicated this on this issue. And we as staff are Sheila McKay and I are the two registered lobbyists. We are happy to help any board or individual board members prepare to testify at the Capitol. Obviously, this year that was all done virtually. It remains to be seen. The upcoming session is a short legislative session, February to May. It remains to be seen what the rules for that session will be. We certainly are hopeful that there will be the opportunity for in-person interaction, because like with most other things in life, it seems to be a little more effective. But please be in touch if there's ways that we can support you in your advocacy efforts, because I know that that is one of the things that you've identified as something that you want to be more engaged in. So what about legislation that impacts curriculum? Well, one thing to remember when legislation goes through a long process. So there are bills that start out that we would say, that's a terrible bill. It's very prescriptive. It's one size fits all. It doesn't allow boards to customize to the needs of their own community. I'll use an example. A number of years ago, a legislator thought that there should be a law that said there shouldn't be more than 15 minutes of homework a night for kindergarten through second grade, no more than 30 minutes, third grade through fifth, and it went on from there. You get the idea. Very, very rigid. Clearly, perhaps a son or daughter of that legislator or a neighbor was not particularly happy with the amount of homework they were getting. What we said was, you really don't need to address this issue, legislature, but it became clear that they were going to address it one way or another. So we said, all right, then have a requirement. If you feel it's so important as a legislature to make a statement about this, have a requirement that every board adopt a policy about homework. So you as local board members may say, well, that's really not necessary for the legislature to tell us to do that. But given the choice between getting something very prescriptive and being told, all right, adopt a policy. Policies can be as general as it's the discretion of the classroom teacher to decide about homework, to something that provides some more parameters around the issue. So when you see some of these issues that I'm going to talk about, some pieces of legislation that were adopted, they did go through a process. They started in most cases in a very different place. So in 2019, the legislature adopted a requirement that all schools, all high schools offer a course in African American, Black, Puerto Rican, and Latino studies beginning in the fall of 2022. And I know that you are well underway in developing your curriculum for that course. That is an elective course. It's, again, a piece of legislation that started out as a high school graduation requirement for every student in the state. That's not where it ended up. Pre-K through 3 reading curriculum. You have to have one in place by July 1st, 2023. I suspect you already have one in place. This specifies that the curriculum needs to be either one approved by the new literacy center that the legislature has established at the State Department of Education, or a waiver that you get from the department because you're using something, an alternative curriculum that meets, that is of high quality. So again, there'll be a process that a district has to go through, but you're not locked in to a limited range of reading curriculum. And the history of that legislation is there are some districts in the state where there are far too many children who are not able to read by 3rd grade, and there's a real commitment by the legislators and all of us to try and remedy that situation. Legislature in the past session required that you adopt a challenging curriculum policy by July 1st, 2022. And that there are a couple of parameters around that. You have to identify students in grades 8 and 9 who may be eligible for advanced course or programs, and you have to have a student academic plan. It can be college or career for their academic plan. Again, I suspect you already have something in place, so probably not very likely that the requirement is going to impact you. Again, there are some districts that there's a feeling that not enough students are challenged and encouraged to take those challenging courses, those courses that may earn them some college credit while they're still in high school. Another curriculum area is a requirement from this past session, and many of these that I'm talking about right now all passed during the special session in a piece of legislation that was over 800 pages long. So it had a lot in it, to say the least. Requirement that the State Department of Education develop a model curriculum for grades K through 8. They have to develop it by January 1st, 2023. The legislation is very clear. Boards of education may use that curriculum. Again, they're trying to address the fact that, particularly in some of our smaller districts, our severely under-resourced districts, they don't have the professional expertise to develop a robust curriculum. They have to reinvent the wheel. They just don't have the resources to do it. You, on the other hand, are in a very different situation, and I know you'll be hearing tonight from some of your professionals, your experts in that area. But I want to emphasize the legislation is very clear. Boards may use the curriculum. This session, they added Native American Studies must be included in the social studies curriculum in the 2023-24 school year. Again, not an individual course requirement, just incorporated into the social studies curriculum. What about some other issues that the legislature considered? Well, they're allowing you to administer a social emotional learning assessment. You have to have parental permission in order to do that. That would fall into the category of you don't actually have to make that permissive. Boards could already do it, but with obviously the concerns, the heightened concerns around the social emotional well-being of our students, they wanted to put an emphasis on that. The religious exemption for immunization was eliminated early in the past legislative session. There is a requirement that parents have the option to participate in conferences in a virtual environment, something we learned during the pandemic actually made it possible for more families to engage in that process. You will be allowed to authorize virtual learning for grades 9 through 12 beginning July 1st of 2022. There is no virtual learning option in the current school year, and this is very specific that it is only for grades 9 through 12. There is a task force that is meeting that is looking at those issues. Lon Seidman, a board member from Region 4, represents school boards on that task force. And in a good news department, lawyers don't always get to deliver good news. The legislature, because of the turmoil created by the pandemic, suspended the decreases in ECS funds that were scheduled to take place for a 2-year period. So there's a 2-year grace period, and I know this is a community that provides a little bit of relief to. So task force is meeting in the interim this year. I talked about the remote learning task force. The department has to look at the feasibility of creating a statewide remote learning school, which would be administered by the State Department of Education. And they have until July 1st of 2023 to make that report to the legislature. There's a task force to study children's needs. It's a 25-member task force. It's very broad. The current CABE president will represent school boards on that task force. There's a task force to increase the completion rates for the federal student aid program. Again, something that the students in some districts have struggled with. And there's a special education task force that I'll represent school boards on to look at both special education services and funding. I'm not particularly optimistic that the ultimate outcome will be the legislature finally removes the cap on the excess cost grant and meets their commitment to it, but you can be assured that that will be one of the things that I'll be advocating for in that process. With that, I think I better stop and see what questions you have.
Great. Thank you, Patrice. Really appreciate it. Any questions or comments for Patrice?
Can I just ask one quick question about
sure.
a piece of legislation?
Sure.
I understand that the state agreed with us about snow days and changed the legislation around that so that there's no remote option currently for snow days.
There is currently no remote option for snow days. That was a one-year opportunity, if you will. It certainly is an issue that continues to be discussed at the state level.
Yeah, I mean, I made light of it a little bit, but you're right, because there are storms that are single day versus storms that might put you out for 3, 4, or 5 days.
Yeah.
And right now, there's no flexibility that would allow us to go remote, even if a storm puts us out for multiple days.
Right. And there are storms that cause massive power outages and
Right.
storms that don't. So, yes.
So we're working on that
Yeah.
piece too, to try to refine that a bit, so we have more flexibility.
Good.
I have a question just on how boards, across the state, you see so many of them and speak with a lot of them, how they handle, as a board, approaching legislation. Do they have committees? Do they operate as a board? Are there any best practices or ideas you could share with us?
The vast majority of boards, just when they discuss legislation, discuss it at the full board level. And a couple of reasons for that. If you're actually going to take action as a board, obviously it has to get to the full board. And the legislative process moves very quickly at some points in the legislative session. At some points, it's like watching paint dry. But other times, there'll be amendments that are flying around, one at 4 in the afternoon, one at 6, one at 8, another one at 10, that completely change the nature of a piece of legislation. So something that you might have opposed because of certain provisions in it at 4 o'clock, by 10 o'clock, those provisions have been removed and through your effective advocacy, and now it's something that you'd be able to fully support. So I think that's another reason that really most boards find it more effective to have the discussion at the board table and then communicate with their legislators.
Okay, thank you. I see Gianna, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Patrice. Thanks for coming. Quick question on a status update of where I know the regionalization conversation sort of stalled after 2 years ago, but there's sort of a belief that will be coming back at some point, and I wanted to sort of get your expertise and understand where that might be coming. And also, I can't remember where CABE came out during those discussions a few years ago.
Great questions. I certainly expect that the discussion about regionalization will reoccur, probably not likely in this upcoming legislative session because it's a short session and there really is only so much they can accomplish. Where we came out was state, don't force districts into arrangements that change a governance structure, provide support for voluntary initiatives, many of which already take place, but be more supportive of those so that there can be the opportunity for collaboration, but without breaking down the governance structures, because that's where you get to the point of a lot of controversy, a lot of energy and effort expended, and we don't see a corollary in terms of an educational benefit for students.
Thank you.
Another question? Penny?
They recently changed the open choice policy in Connecticut. I was just wondering if you could comment on CABE's view or experience with open choice in Connecticut.
Open choice, of course, in the Hartford region has been in place for many years, and it was part of the chef settlement agreement that the state entered into. The expansion of open choice is, I believe, came out of interest in some districts to provide for some more cross-pollination across district lines. Also, I know in Danbury, for example, there was a real impetus around the fact that their schools are very overcrowded. Their student population is rising significantly, and yet there are schools in the surrounding communities where there are empty classrooms. So that was really the impetus, whereas the Hartford region was very much focused on this was to be a component of settling a lawsuit.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? I found this very helpful, and I think we all did, and I hope that you'll come back again, because I think these updates are important. I know we've discussed it as a board in past meetings and part of our district goals, how important it is just to keep a pulse on what's happening at the state level, and certainly having that connection through you is always beneficial.
I promise to come back whenever invited.
All right, deal.
Thank you.
Oh, Bob? Sorry.
Can we get a copy of that, the list that you were reading, from the stuff that
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what? Let me have it typed. These are literally my
notes.
handwritten
Yeah.
notes.
You know what I could do, Patrice? I can get copies of the CABE
The-
summary of all the legislative action that
That'd be
occurred this
great,
year.
'cause I
It's
can
pretty
write it down.
thick. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've got
You
one or
should
two
have
of
gotten
those.
this. Every board member should have gotten this because the mailing is just like the Cape Journal distribution. So.
But I'll get some extra, I'll make sure everybody has one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are
glad to.
particularly helpful, because the monthly, or how frequent do the advocacy highlights come? Is that? it's
We
just
used to
whenever
just say
there's-
we'll send it every Friday, but we also, so during the legislative session, it comes every Friday, but it will come midweek if we find out about a public hearing that's going to take place on
Right.
Friday. So, you know,
Well, if you
you
hear
can
about it
count on the
midweek and
Friday.
it's Friday, that's a lot of notice. Usually it's on Tuesday and the hearing's on Wednesday.
right.
Yeah, yeah, how quickly it is.
I know.
But
Cranking out that testimony is just really joyful.
but that summary is excellent, the one that you held up before. So
Yeah.
I think you'll find that beneficial. Yeah.
Good. All right, thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
down. Oh,
Katrina, can I
Deanna?
ask Patrice one more question?
Yep.
So, I know, having attended a CABE convention years ago, that the legislative priorities are often created at that meeting. There's a vote at that meeting, is that correct?
What we have is, we have our delegate assembly the day before the convention. So this year it will be on Thursday, November 11th. The convention this year is a one-day convention to accommodate COVID protocols. The delegate assembly is where we adopt the overall positions of the association. So that gives us the direction from the membership on issues that won't necessarily be our priorities, but someone else may bring them up. Then, after the delegate assembly, usually in early December, our state relations committee actually sets the legislative priorities for the upcoming year. And we try to limit that to about 5 issues that we're going to push affirmatively. Now, that we still have all those other issues that other people are going to be raising that we'll have to deal with, and there is no, and anything that we have an overall position on, we do submit testimony on behalf of the association.
So does, so that assembly that happens on the 11th, do many districts send representatives, Board of Ed members? Because I'm not sure we've ever done that. And so I just, maybe I'm coming off the board, but I think that is something that maybe, do you have many representatives from the Fairfield County DRGA schools?
We have representatives statewide. We wish more boards would be engaged in the process, quite honestly. So we would very much welcome participation.
My sense, Patrice, and maybe there's a better way to do it from a K perspective, because when I went to the convention, I felt like there was a very heavy priority in the legislative initiatives on inner city district priorities. when I was sitting at those meetings. And so I didn't feel like that was really speaking to our district. And I don't know if it's, if there's a way that we can engage other districts to sort of speak more clearly for our type of schools.
Yeah, and it's sort of ironic because we hear from time to time from our urban districts that say, you really seem focused on the suburbs. So I will say this, I've been at CABE long enough to remember when a New Canaan Board of Education member was the president of our association, Raymond Spike Lanou. And so the New Canaan's voice has been heard, and we hope will continue to be heard.
Thank you.
Sounds like there's some rain out there for you.
Oh.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay, our next report this evening is an update on our curriculum and an overview of the design and purpose of our curriculum led by Dr. Jill Carenti, our Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction.
And while Jill is coming to the podium, I'll just give a brief introduction, although she needs none, certainly from me. But just to share for anyone who may not know, Dr. Carenti is our Deputy Superintendent. She's been in the role, this is her 9th year now, in the role as our Deputy Superintendent. And prior to that, she served as our principal over at West School with distinction for 9 years. So she's been in the district for a little bit. Prior to coming to New Canaan, she worked in Greenwich and in Stamford as well. I am very fortunate as a superintendent to have the best deputy superintendent, not just in the state, but I'd argue in the country. The experiences that she's had, the depth of knowledge that she brings to the role, and the cooperative nature in which she approaches the work every day is truly second to none. And our district, as we think about the different roles of each of the members of our cabinet and the work that we do, I talked to Jill about the fact that she heads up our research and development department, and she does our R&D in the curriculum work that we do. And she also is sort of our head of quality control in all the teacher evaluation work, and ensuring that the R&D and the curriculum work and the development of the curriculum and units and things that occur with Jill and the CLC and others is all implemented with fidelity. I know when we were doing the goals, we talked a little bit about fidelity of implementation here. So it's not just putting them down on paper, it's actually making sure they're actualized in practices in the classroom. I'm sorry, Jill, I'm going on, but I can keep going. The other thing just to share is so many districts have sort of arbitrary timelines and guidelines around curriculum development. So they'll say every 7 years or 5 years or 10 years, we're going to write a curriculum. And what happens is they create really nice glossy binders and they put them on the shelf and they stay there until it's their turn 7 years later or 5 years later. What you're going to hear tonight is a much more dynamic process than that really results in living documents across the board that do directly impact the experiences that our students have in the classroom and the outcomes that we're looking for. So with that, Dr. Carenti, thank you. And CLC, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lutzy.
As I said, I could go on, but it's all yours.
And I plan to go on, but I promise I will try to keep it concise and clear. Certainly, it's an honor to be here tonight to talk about a subject area that we're all very passionate about. And when I was asked to present several weeks ago, I joked that I would be bringing some colleagues along with me. And many of you have met the members of CLC through many of the presentations that they have done here at the board. But I would like to take a moment to just introduce the people and the members of our CLC. So certainly when you look at the group of people on this page, we're so fortunate because we have such a wonderful group of professionals leading our district. They are content experts, actively involved locally, at the state level, and nationally. They connect regularly with other professionals in our district, at other districts, at the university level, and even in their field of study. So I'm going to take a moment to just read through their names because I do think it's really important so that you understand the roles of all the members of our CLC. And when Brian talks about the curriculum in this district, it can only be so good about the people who are all here standing behind me. So without them, we would not have what we have here in New Canaan Public Schools. So I am here tonight to speak on their behalf, and they will certainly be available to answer questions. But it is so proud, I am so proud to introduce all of these members. We have Kathy Grimes, who is our reading coordinator for grades K through 4. We have Karen Scalzo, who is our reading coordinator for, our writing coordinator for grades K through 5. We have Sarah Bross, who is our English Language Arts coordinator for Sachs Middle School, grades 5 through 8. We have Nicole Graham, who's our math coordinator for grades K through 8. Melinda Meyer, our science coordinator for grades K through 8. Mary Hanna, our social studies coordinator for grades K through 8. Jonathan Adams, our health coordinator for grades K through 8, and AKA our Dean of Students at Sachs for our lower division. We also have Bob Russo, who's Special Education Administrator for elementary, Vanessa Visners, who's a Special Education Administrator for Sachs, Kevin Ryan, who's the Special Education Administrator for the high school, Susan Bliss, who is our Student Sport Coordinator, and Ashley Tremblay, who's in charge of our assistive technology in our district here. Additionally, we have Evan Remley, our language arts, English language arts department chair for the high school, grades 9 through 12. Rebecca Pavia, our department chair for math. Bob Stevenson, our department chair for social studies. Michael LeDuc, our department chair for science. Jim Zambarano, our department chair for CTE, Consumer Technology Education. Michelle Ludala, our department chair for ICT, Information Communication Technology. Cynthia Rivera, our department chair for guidance. Lizette D'Amico, our world language coordinator for grades K through 12. Jay Egan, our PE and health coordinator for grades K-12. Matt Salvestrini, our digital learning administrator for grades K through 12. And Alan Sneath, our VPA director for grades K through 12. So it is a very powerful group who brings years of experience. And this evening I asked them a week ago, I go, just give me an idea of how many years you've been teaching and how many years you've been in New Canaan. And when you add up all the years that these people have been teaching and or leading others, you have 512 years. 512 years of experience that these people bring to the table every single day to work with our teachers and with our students. And 269 of these years are been dedicated to New Canaan Public Schools. The average is about 23. I didn't figure out the mode. I didn't figure out the mean. But you can get a perspective. They bring a tremendous amount of content knowledge and expertise in instruction. So I thought that in order to give you an understanding of curriculum, it's really important to have an understanding of how it's designed. And we need to start with that process. So I know in many presentations you've heard the term UBD, or understanding by design. And I certainly apologize if this is repetitive for some of the board members, but I do think it's important to review a few concepts so that we can create a very clear picture of the process that we follow in the New Canaan Public Schools. So first of all, UBD is a framework, and the framework was developed by two very famous people in the field of education, Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe. Grant Wiggins is no longer with us. He passed away several years ago, but Jay McTighe is still actively involved in the field and still conducts trainings and webinars. He is really the guru in UBD. And this is a framework, and it's a tool that we utilize that really is to help us plan our curriculum, assessment, and instruction. So why do we use UBD? We've used UBD in this district for many years. This is not new. It was here prior to my arrival in 2005. But UBD it's a framework, and it's a very important framework for the following reasons. The framework really helps us to focus our curriculum and instruction on developing and deepening our student understanding. it follows a backward design model. So that allows us to work backwards from the desired results. So we always start with what are the desired results that we want for our students in any unit of study, any curriculum area. The backward design also helps us avoid very common problems that happen in teaching. Here is the textbook, and I teach to the textbook, page to page to page. When you have a backward design, the textbook is used as a resource. So you only use the textbook when you need it to help support a lesson that you might be using in your classroom. And we use lots of resources to support all the lessons and the units of study that we do. The design also helps teachers to focus on ensuring that learning happens and not just assuming that what they taught was learned. And that's important as we begin to talk about the different stages. And then the UBD framework reflects a continual improvement approach to student achievement and our teacher craft. So there are 3 stages to the backward design. There's stage 1, where you identify the desired results for our students. There's stage 2, where you determine the assessment and you try to determine how will you assess that the students have learned what you plan on teaching. And then the last one is stage 3, which is you plan the learning experience and the instruction. And all 3 stages must be clearly aligned. The stage 1 content and understanding must be what is assessed in stage 2 and taught in stage 3. So when you think of this UBD, you have to say, where do you even begin? So we begin with the people. That's the most important thing. As Mrs. McCarthy just shared with us, that if you have the expertise within your district, then you have the ability to understand and to develop the curriculum. So we're very fortunate because we have highly qualified staff who are experts in content and instruction. And you need to be experts in both in order to develop curriculum and to understand how it's going to be rolled out for our students. You also have to have professional learning. And this goes beyond just the leaders that are sitting behind me. The professional learning has to happen for all staff. All staff need to understand UBD. They have to have an understanding of how our units of study are written. So it's really that both the designers and the users understand the framework and understand how they go about teaching using that framework. And then the next important thing are the national and state standards. So we have standards in all of our areas. So you probably are most familiar with the Common Core Standards. And in Connecticut, they're called the Connecticut Core Standards. And those are the ones that we utilize in math and English language arts. But you'll also see that we have the Next Generation Science Standards, Connecticut Social Studies Framework, the National Core Art Standards, the National Health Education Standards, and the American Council of Teaching a Foreign Language. So as you can see, it is very comprehensive, and they're reaching all of our content areas for all of us. So just to give you a quick example of what a standard might look like, I went back and I took a look at just second grade. And so in second grade, we have 4 math domains. We have our operations and algebraic thinking. We have our number and operations in base 10, measurement and data, and geometry. And then within each of those domains are multiple standards. So here are 2 examples. So the 2 stands for second grade. The OA stands for operations and algebraic thinking. And 2 just happens to be the number of that standard within the series of 8 or 9 standards that might be falling within that domain. And this is an example of a standard. Fluently add and subtract within 20 using mental strategies. Note, see the standard 1 OA, that's going back to our first grade, for a list of mental strategies. By end of grade 2, know from memory all sums of 2 one-digit numbers. That's really important. Our second graders should know all of that information. You move into the next standard, just another example, number and operations in base 10. Once again, fluently add and subtract within 100. That's important. using strategies based on place value, properties of operations, and our relationships between addition and subtraction. So it's important that our students know these standards. It's the experts who spend that time unpacking those standards and really taking a deep look and saying, okay, so if that's the standard that we want our second graders to master, what does it look like? What's the end result for our students? How will we know that our students can do that? And it's the teachers who have that expertise, because not only do they need to know the end result, they also need to know how to get to the end result. So this is an example of our UBD framework. It's blank. And we start with stage 1. And stage 1 is really giving us an overview of our unit of study. As you can see in the left-hand column, that's where the standards are going to go for that unit of study. So if you're doing something in place value, or shortly you're going to show you the example of our study of Connecticut, you're going to see the standards that go for that content area, and that unit of study will be outlined in that box. You'll then see the overview, and then you'll have an understanding of the time frame. How long will this unit last? A unit could last 6 weeks, could last 8 weeks, could last 12 weeks. It truly depends on the unit of study. It truly depends on the age of the students, and it certainly depends on the content in which you're teaching. After the overview of the unit, we have what we call a transfer goal. And the transfer goal is very important because it's how the students will apply what they've learned in other areas. So you're always looking at what is it that we want them to ultimately be able to do with the knowledge that they gain from this unit of study, and how might it be applied in other content areas, or certainly even in just life skills. And then we have our enduring understandings and our essential questions. And what are those, the meaning of that unit? What is it that we want students to understand? And what is it that we want students to consider? And then we move into our acquisition. And the acquisition can get long and lengthy, because that's what we want our students to know and what we want our students to be able to do. And when you look at the acquisition, it's often aligned to the standards that are being taught. So I thought I would just give you an example of a UBD that we use. And I chose social studies because I'm hoping that you'll all remember that Mary, Hannah, and Bob Stevenson were here in the spring, and they talked a little bit about our social studies curriculum, and they mentioned the framework and the different dimensions that we teach within this content area and what it looks like K-12. And they spent a lot of time talking about the inquiry arc. So I'm just trying to refresh some of our memory. So in math, I talked about the 4 domains in math. And in social study, as you may recall, there's 4 dimensions in social studies. And in social studies, the 4 dimensions are developing questions, applying disciplinary concepts and tools, and that's where you really dive into the civics and the geography and the history and the economics. And then you move into evaluating sources and communicating conclusions. So in this case, when you're looking at the social studies overview, you'll see that the transfer goal, happens to be a unit on our state, Connecticut, and you'll see that the transfer goal is really participate as active and responsible citizens in their communities, work effectively with and learn from others in a variety of situations in the community. And what we want our second graders to know is that states have geography, that they have culture, they have social, economic, and political identities, that our state government provides service for safety, other, education, and the health of its citizen, and that people can make a difference in our state. And then we move into those essential questions that usually align right with those enduring understandings. So what makes a good place to live and work? What gives our state its identity? How does our government provide for the needs of the citizens? How can people make a difference in their communities? And then you're going to see that the acquisition goes on, and I'm not going to read through all of those details up there, save you just a little bit of time. I know you guys were a little worried about that, but I promised. They do need to get home tonight. But you'll see that that acquisition really is taking those standards and it's moving it across. And it's really trying to explain what we want students to know and what we want students to be able to do. That's just stage one of our UBD. That's where we always begin. So we always look at the standards. We always start in that place. From there, we move into stage two, and this is the assessment. So how will we know students have achieved the desired results? What will we accept as evidence of student understanding and their ability to use the transfer, that new learning in new situations? And having a clear picture of where you want students to go and be able to do at the end of a unit of study is so important. Because if you don't have that clear picture, often what happens is you just start to do activities with kids. You do one activity after another, but you're not going back and really teaching them how to get to that desired result. We also are always looking at those assessments. We're always going back and having deep conversations about the depth of knowledge. So where are they on that depth of knowledge when we give them our assessment? Are they at just that low level, or are they really at that place where they're taking what they've learned and transferring it? Are they evaluating? Are they synthesizing? Are they analyzing? That's all those critical thinking skills that are so important for kids. So how do we help kids to learn how to think? We don't tell them what to think, but we teach them how to think. So normally we don't share assessments because, as you can imagine, they're pretty high stakes, especially if I was to share the pre-calculus assessment for high school. We could imagine that might be kind of exciting for some people to finally tune in and see what the assessment looked like. We might have a large group of high schoolers that all of a sudden heard that Dr. Crenti was sharing the pre-calculus assessment and might tune into this Board of Ed meeting. So I picked something that's low stakes. It's our social studies assessment that we would use to evaluate this unit of study. And it's a fun way to assess kids. We go back to those enduring understandings. We want to make sure that kids know the geography of Connecticut, that they understand the culture and social economics and the political identities of Connecticut, that they understand about our government, and that people can make a difference in their state. So here's the performance-based assessment that we're going to ask our second graders to do at the end of this unit. They're going to create something the government might use to tell people about Connecticut and why it's a good place to live, work, or visit. And your role is you're an expert in Connecticut. And your audience is that you have visitors and people who wish to move to your state. And the situation is the Connecticut government has asked you to help them advertise about our state. You and your class have a chance to choose what form this might take. It should be something: brochure, video, new conference, Flipgrid. You can imagine the technology that has expanded within this choice for students and for classes. And that's one of the positives that we've had as an outcome of COVID. And then it certainly gets into the criteria. Your piece must include organizing concepts such as government, as geography, industry, people, history, government. And that talks about how you're going to go about with your reason and your details. And that you'll get extra praise if you kind of connect it to the charter that we have in each of our classrooms. As you go into the history, we talk about why is Connecticut the charter state. So that's the assessment. So we know where our students have to be at the end. It's a problem-based assessment. Kind of fun for second graders, I think. So then we move into stage 3. Stage 3 is going to vary from unit to unit based on the age of the learner and the possible content. And so the example that I'm going to show you is very detailed, and I'm showing you that for a reason. So as you can imagine, if I'm a second grade teacher, I am required to teach reading, writing, math, social studies, and science. I need to be an expert in all the areas. So what we do is we're so fortunate because we have experts that can help all of these teachers. But we take a little bit of the burden away from them when it comes to social studies and science. We really want our second grade teachers to spend as much time as possible planning for the readers and the writers and the mathematicians in their classrooms. You need to be able to read in order to do social studies. You need to be able to write in order to do social studies and science. So it's really important that they have all those foundational skills. And when we talk about teaching second grade, and certainly any of the grade levels, we always use that word differentiation of instruction. So it's knowing those learners that are in front of us, looking at the assessment along the way, and then trying to figure out how we're going to get all those learners to the desired outcomes. So the social studies tends to have a little bit more details in it for our second graders. If you were to look at a UBD for a middle schooler or a high school, it would be very different, that learning stage. The first two stages would be identical, a lot of detail, but as you move into stage 3, you got to remember you have experts in that content area that are teaching it, that really, this is where the magic is. This is where the creativity is. This is where the art of teaching lies. It's all within these lessons. And we do need to give teachers some flexibility with those lessons, because they know the students that are in front of them, and those students change from year to year and even period to period if you're in the middle school teaching English. Period 1 class might be very different than the period 2 class. It's all about the kids that are in front of them. And I saw this graphic, and I thought this was just kind of a great way to kind of just visually see that differentiation of instruction. Because as a teacher, it would be great if I could just teach the content one way and all the learners would understand what we taught the first time I taught them. And that would be the yellow line. I just keep going and teaching. But we know that's not the way students learn. They follow the white path. They all learn differently. And so it's our job to figure out how to assess all those learners and to teach all those learners. And that's where that whole piece of that stage 3 takes place. How do you address all the individual learners within your classroom so that they can all meet the desired outcomes that we've shared? So I thought I would just walk you quickly through a social studies unit of study. So it's always fun. We love to launch different units of study, and we often talk at CLC, the launches and how we get kids excited about the new content that we're going to be teaching. What you'll notice within this UBD are lots of hyperlinks. So the teachers have that flexibility to go in and click on links. It brings them right to resources. It brings them right to sample lessons. And it just is a great way to kind of use the technology to help our teachers with the instruction. And in this unit of study, what a fun way to study the state of Connecticut, because we're going to take a bus trip. And we are going to drive through Connecticut. And along the way, we're going to learn about the geography of Connecticut. And we're going to learn about the government. And we're going to learn about the history and the industry and the innovation and the arts and the culture of Connecticut. And I have to tell you, I've looked at this unit several years ago, and just revisiting it, it's amazing what's in Connecticut. It's amazing about the history here in Connecticut, and what the kids have the opportunity to learn and explore. And it was interesting as Mrs. McCarthy was even talking about the Native Americans. And you'll see there is a piece in here about how the Native Americans were the first people in our state. So we've already included some of that within our curriculum. We always have this little feature at the end of our units of study. It's not part of something that Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins put in, but as a CLC, we always thought it was so important. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of add special little features that might be helpful to your content area or in particular to that unit of study. So you'll often see vocabulary. So it might be rich with vocabulary. There might be misconceptions that occur in science and math that you have to watch for when you're teaching. Sometimes there's the ICT connections, especially as you're talking about social studies and we're talking about evaluating sources. We always include a little piece here with SAPL. You know, how are we addressing our social, academic, personal learning? And then there's also resources that we might want to use with our students who are EL or students who are special education. And this is just an example of the last page of the unit of study for social studies. So what I just shared with you is just one unit of study. One unit of study doesn't make up the second grade curriculum. In social studies, there are 4 units of study that make up the social studies curriculum. In math, there's 8 units of study. In reading, there's 7 units of study. In writing, there's 7 units of study. In science, there's 4 units of study. So you can see that it's the units of study that come together to make up the social studies curriculum or the reading curriculum. And that's what's a little bit different about an elementary school. When you get to the middle school and high school, it might be the 4 units of study that make up the course. And so those units of study might be a little bit longer, a little bit lengthier, or that might make up the 7th grade English class. So we talk about the role of the Curriculum Leadership Council. As I just shared with you, that unit of study is made right here in New Canaan. That's designed. That's working with teachers who have been trained, that are being led by our social studies coordinator and going through it. So that's, I mean, we could probably sell that unit of study. I mean, it's amazing when you look at that. You're not going to get a unit of study like that off of a canned program. It's just not going to be there. This is really tailored to our students and tailored to the teachers to help them to learn this content and to move forward. So as a role of Curriculum Leadership Council, we recommend, we develop, we review, and we approve curriculum. So when we talk about the recommendation, that's going to be driven by new standards. So when there's new standards that are coming forward, that's when we're really sitting here saying, okay, it's time that we have to go back and we have to look at our science curriculum because the next generation science standards are going in place, and how can we start preparing for it? What research should we do? How do we get our teachers on board so they have a deep understanding of it? Or sometimes it could be a new course proposal at the high school. So we might have a department that comes forward to say, you know, we've done interior design 1 and we'd like to offer an advanced class in interior design. And so there's a conversation that we talk about and we go through a course proposal. And then it's really that developing. So you examine all those stages. We collaborate with teachers to really create the New Canaan Public Schools curriculum. And then we review. So there people that are working on this curriculum are constantly coming back to CLC and talking and asking for feedback and asking hard questions. And this is a tough group. They're really wonderful with one another, and they ask really great questions of each other. And it's amazing when you put people that have different content backgrounds in one room, because they're asking, well, what does that really mean in English? Oh, well, that's very similar to what I do in math. We just call it something different. Or this is what I call it in social studies. It also allows us to see a vertical alignment. So when you're looking at a unit of study, you're always saying, well, where does that fit with what was taught the year before in 7th grade, and where will that fit in 8th grade, and where will that fit as we move into high school? So you're always looking at that vertical alignment. You're also making sure that you don't have repetition, because you don't want to be teaching the same character unit year after year after year. When you come together as a group, you're able to look at that vertical alignment to say, oh, so we have to teach it slightly different here, or we need to adjust it here, or we need to add this. And then certainly, we go through an approval process. And we do have a framework that we follow, and we look at each of the stages, and we evaluate our units of study according to those stages and according to this protocol. And we follow a protocol because it really gives us an opportunity for both the presenter and the audience to listen and ask questions of one another. And sometimes there are times where you have to go back and rewrite because it's not clear enough. And so we ask that of each other. And we respect one another when we're together in a group. The role of the Curriculum Leadership Council in curriculum. So once again, I'm just talking about one piece of their job. they have so many roles that they play within the district here. But as we're just talking about curriculum tonight, another piece is really to present to the Board of Education and to parents. And then those presentations to the Board of Education, they're really organized by our district goals. And so we try to follow our district goals, and we use that as an opportunity to come forward and to present to the Board of Ed. And the district goals in a particular content area are really determined when there's major changes that are necessary. So when we talk a little bit about health, well, we discovered that we had a big gap with our health curriculum in our elementary schools. And so that was going back to a district goal about we really need to look at those national health standards and try to figure out what are we going to do in our elementary schools and how are we going to go about teaching health. And so that was presentation that was part of a district goal, and then it's coming forward, presenting to all of you, getting feedback from all of you, working with teachers, working with CLC. So it's a cyclical process that just continues. Science, that's been another district goal. Where are we with the next generation science standards? And now you'll see VPA. And certainly, when you look here, you'll see these are just some of the presentations that we've done in front of the board. You can also find all of the presentations. Oh, and it's not showing on my screen here. This is always the glitch when you try to go off. I'm not sure what happened here. But if you go onto the district website, I don't want to take any more time. I just can't figure out how to show that on the screen. And then as soon as I show it, I'm probably going to take it down. But
There you go.
okay. So if you go out to the district website, under Board of Education, you'll see these presentations to the Board of Ed. And so it gives you an opportunity to just see all of the different presentations we've done in curriculum, instruction, assessment. And then there's certainly the YouTube video that you can watch at the Board of Education meeting. And so those all are outlined there. What's really interesting, oops. Is when we look at the science updates to the Board of Education. So this is what happens when you work in a district for such a long period of time, or you have your colleague, Melinda Meyer, who's worked in the district for such a long period of time. You have a history. And so it's fascinating. When I went to look back at the history of the presentations to the Board of Education, in around 2004, 2005 was when Connecticut had made changes to their science standards. And so you'll see that in 2007 and then again in 2008 there were times where the science department at the time, I think it was Tim Haig and Melinda Meyer, were coming forward to do presentations to the board. So here's the new state standards in science. This is how we're interpreting them. This is how we're rolling out that curriculum in the science area. And then in 2011, we also were lucky because we had a tri-state visit in science, which actually gave us some feedback on how we were rolling out our new standards in science. And so that was another presentation to the board. 2011 was when we were moving forward with some of our STEM initiatives. And then in 2014, we came back to the board again to give you an update of where we were with those STEM initiatives. And then you'll see as we fast forward to 2015 was when we adopted the next generation science standards. And so now we were back in front of the board in June of 2016, again in December of 2017. There was a brief update in October of 2019. And then as we talked about the district goals, we need to come back and do a presentation of where the next generation science standards are in high school. And so we talked about the geophysical course and then certainly where we are with biology and chemistry in regards to those standards. So we're constantly coming in front of the board to gather feedback and to give updates along the way. Health, I don't think I need to give too much information in regards to health. I think many of you could get up and do the health presentations. But once again, you'll see those updates to the board. And then you started to see our presentations for the visual and performing arts. And so we had come to the board in May of 2019, gave a snapshot of where we were. In August of 2019, Alan came forward and talked about the standards and where the standards were shifting. And then we moved into COVID. And so our work did stop because, as you know, when our kids came back last fall, the department that really had to be very creative with how they were delivering instruction to students was our visual and performing arts, because the kids couldn't sing and there was so many safety mitigation. And then what's most interesting, when I looked back at the history of world language and why it was a district goal for so long, so much of that went on the ongoing implementation of FLES. And so we were really tracking our kids and how we were shifting our programs in middle school and how we were shifting our programs in the high school. And right now, our first class of children who had FLES, which is foreign language in the elementary school, are juniors. And so that's really why that was on there for so long. We also talked a little bit, it was nice to have Mrs. McCarthy here this evening to talk about legislative mandates. And certainly in this health letter that goes home every year, the one health mandate that's always addressed is the sexual abuse and assault. It is a mandate that we're supposed to instruct to our students in elementary school. Once again, did the state design a curriculum? They did. And that word may, you may use it. And I think we've talked about that, those lessons, and we share those lessons with the parents. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we're doing a health presentation for all the parents in grades 1 through 5. We share what the 2 lessons are that we do to address that topic, so parents have an opportunity to look at the lessons and make an informed decision. It's the only thing right now that I can think of that parents have a choice of opting out. They can't opt out of our health curriculum, but they can opt out of those 2 or 3 lessons that are taught. And then we do our best to communicate to parents. And we do have a website. Oh boy, here we go again. And so this is our curriculum website. Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay.
So good that I have you here. And we spent a lot of time developing this website because we really wanted it to be a place where parents could go and find out what we're teaching in each of the areas. And so when you click on the areas, you could go to mathematics. You'll see kind of an overview about the curriculum. But then you can dive into each of the grade levels. And you'll actually see the units of study. And so we try to give the overview to the parents as well as the enduring understandings and the essential questions. The people that you want to contact always start with your classroom teacher, but then we also have the math coordinator's name as well on the district website for anybody to contact. So we do not put the full UBD up onto the website because, as you can imagine, there's many links that the teachers are using as living documents and working in all the time. And it also has our assessments, but it gives a perspective of what we teach at each of the grade levels. When you move into high school, we tend to go for those core areas. So you'll see freshman English, sophomore English, junior English, or you'll see the algebra course or geometry or pre-calculus. There are so many electives that are offered at the high school that you wouldn't be able to put everything up there. But the next best place for a parent to find out about an elective is to go to our course catalog at the high school, which gives you a very nice description of what the course is all about and what might be some of the prerequisites in order to take that course. So we are going to have a health presentation, as I said, tomorrow. It's going to be a webinar for October 5th. The other thing that we realized is in 2019, the fall of 2019, we were kind of on overload. Parents were watching so many presentations that they were kind of like, you know what, we don't need any right now. We've been doing small sessions at the schools in mathematics and small sessions at the school in reading. And then COVID came, and we kind of came to a stop with our parent presentations because there were other priorities that were taking the place. And we realized that as I think of our current second graders, those parents were first in our school the fall of kindergarten. And so really the only exposure that they've probably had is just those teacher open houses and communication with our teachers. So we realized that it's really important for us to get back out there and really do some parent presentations on how do we go about teaching reading and how do we go about teaching writing and mathematics so that people have that perspective. So we're going to begin to start those again. We'll be doing an elementary reading presentation in October, an elementary writing. We'll be moving into middle school English language arts. That's actually going to be in November. And then we'll kick up with math after the holidays. We don't tend to do presentations for the high school, but that's because there's such in probably around February, they do a transition to high school where all the 8th grade parents have an opportunity to go to an orientation and really understand what the graduation credits are for our high school students. They have an opportunity to look at the different course pathways that kids could take. And I have to say that our department chairs have been so incredibly creative as we moved into COVID, and their videos are absolutely phenomenal. And to really hear the different courses that the kids have the opportunity to take in each of the content areas is quite amazing. So I'm actually done and available to answer questions.
Wonderful. Thank you for that very thorough presentation. I have a couple questions, but let's go around and see. Sherry, go ahead.
So Jill, excellent presentation, thank you. And I actually want to thank all of the content experts for being here and on a Monday night, rainy Monday night during a very busy teaching week. And I, for one, am so grateful that we have your 512 years of experience to leverage. I mean, it's incredible. And both as a board member and as a parent of 2 college students who graduated from New Canaan High School and are thriving because of you. So thank you. I also think it's kind of an obvious point that this very thorough process has served us well. You know, I think it's a good time to celebrate the fact that we were just recently ranked #1 in niche rankings statewide in Connecticut, #1 statewide, and that's because of this incredible process. My question really, Jill, is just hoping that you can kind of clarify a question, because unfortunately I recently read an editorial, a local editorial, that I believe was misguided, in which it stated that our curriculum development process has changed. And I know I've been on the board now for 8 years, and during my tenure, I have not seen any changes. We've always been engaged, we've reviewed, we've served as a challenge network, we've asked questions, we've had great dialogue. So I haven't seen any changes, but I'm just curious from your standpoint if you have, or if there have been any structural challenges that perhaps I haven't noticed.
No, and that's why I tried to give the science example of when the science standards shifted in 2004, which meant that we had to take a look at our science curriculum and revise our science curriculum to meet the new state standards that were approved in 2004. And then when you look at the presentations to the board, it's very clear that they were addressing the science standards in 2007 and how they were rolling out, and then in 2008. So the process has always been the same. Some of the people have changed because we've had retirements, or we've had some people move into an administrative position within our district. So other than that, the process is the same. And you know, these people that have been on the CLC, remember, they've been trained in UBD. They've used UBD to design their curriculum. We've always used it as a review place.
And just to add on to that, so, and this process includes 512 years, but advanced degrees in writing curriculum, correct? correct. Can you just talk about that for a second?
Sure. I mean, all of the people that are sitting behind me have at least 2 masters. So they have gone back for their BA, they have a master's, and then in education, we often call that a 6-year. Some of them have beyond that 6-year, and they have plus 90 credits, and there's some that sit here with a doctorate degree as well. So the amount of years of experience is in education and universities is amazing. But that's not where it stops for them. They are learners. They are out there constantly reading and connecting with other professionals in not only in Connecticut, but also nationally.
Thank you.
I'll go have a couple questions. I think it would be helpful to better understand the role of the coordinator. I know most of the CLC is comprised of coordinators that work at different levels within the district, and then the department chairs at the high school. They know their work, this is just one part of their work, but just it would be helpful to understand how the work within the CLC then connects and the work that they do directly with students and teachers in the school environment on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So certainly they're the experts in the curriculum, and so they spend a lot of time in classrooms. So when you're doing a unit of study in second grade, and it might be even a new unit of study, or it might be a unit of study that has been taught in the past, oftentimes you'll see the coordinators doing what we call walkthroughs. So they might be walking through all of the second grade classrooms to see how the unit of study is rolling out and how they might be able to support teachers. They're a real support to new teachers as well in how to unpack the curriculum and how to utilize the UBD that's in front of them. They also do walkthroughs with administrators to help our administrators to understand the curriculum and to look at it from a content perspective. And so that's just some of it. Then they work through data. So right now they're in the process of taking a look at all of the Smarter Balance data that has come in. And at the high school level, they're analyzing SAT data and AP data that has come in as well. And so then they'll spend time talking with the administrators at each of the level and talking about the analysis that they've had of that data. But it doesn't stop there, because then they really need to spend time with the department and unpacking that data and then diving into the individual level of our students. So how are we meeting all the needs of our students? And when you have data that sometimes doesn't match, you might get a smarter balanced result, and it doesn't seem to be matching what you have as unit assessments or a midterm result or final result. You're triangulating, you're looking at it, you're asking good questions. And then they're taking that data and working with the teachers, because those teachers now have the students sitting in front of them. So the data comes in just recently. It'll be getting mailed out to parents very shortly. But now they're saying, okay, so these kids were 6th graders, but what does that mean for the 7th graders that are sitting in front of you? And how do we go through that? They also provide professional learning. So to all of our staff, they run department meetings. They run PLCs. Did I miss anything? They instruct students. They teach. The list just goes on and on. And they're very helpful, to help those teachers when they need students in their classroom extend it or students in their classroom that are remediate it. They attend meetings. They attend student study team meetings. They attend all sort of PPTs. They're active members within our community. So I think I've captured a good picture, and I'm sure there are things that I'm missing that they also do, because they also do a lot of extracurricular things as well.
Great. That's a lot. Great. One other question I had is, what are the exceptions to this process? I think one of the things that come to mind is maybe AP classes at the high school. Are there other exceptions? Could you speak to that and how the process diverges?
So there's probably 2 exceptions that I could think of within the district here. And one is exactly what you just mentioned, and that's AP, the advanced placement classes, which are often driven by College Board. And so you need to remember that the content of those classes has been designed by College Board. And it's really because these are classes that can be counted towards college credit. And sometimes the content that's in those classes is meant to be for college students. And so the AP curriculum is usually designed. Does that mean that the teacher doesn't have any flexibility with what they do? No, of course they have pedagogy and they have instruction, and their job is to help the students to understand the material and to prepare them for an AP exam that they might take as well, but mostly to have a deep understanding of the content that's being presented to them. And probably the other extreme would be Foundations, which is our phonics program, which we teach in grades K1, 2, 3. And so that is a pretty scripted program because certainly when you're teaching phonemic awareness and phonics, there's a sequence that you follow. So you don't start with, silent E. You start with short vowels, and kids have to understand short vowels before you can move on to the next step in our Foundations. So it's a research-based program that has been designed to teach phonics. Does that mean that the teacher doesn't have any flexibility? No, they're always looking at their unit assessments. They're trying to figure out what they need to go back to reteach to students, how they can extend kids within that classroom too during Foundations. It's our word study program.
Thank you. Deanna, and then we'll go to Brendan.
Thanks, Jill. So I wanted to clarify something that was said by Sherry earlier. I think there's some confusion because I actually read the same opinion and actually reached out to some very old board members in the district who predate your tenure in the district and Dr. Lutzi's tenure. And there was a board and community curriculum committee that engaged a couple times, probably quarterly. And they did review curriculum before actually it went to this CLC. So there was input into the curriculum by board members and community members and parents prior to the actual development by the CLC. So we may want to sort of engage those people that are still in the community, and maybe we can reach out to them and get a little more information about that. I really did want to kind of go back into the UBD and sort of dig into the SAPL connections. I noticed the sample lesson that you showed, there was really no information in that SAPL connection. And I'm guessing that based on calls I get and when I get stopped on the street, it tends to be related to those SAPL connections. And I don't know if there is a better way for us to engage parents on how we make those types of connections within. Because I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think anybody in this community is criticizing, the 500 and, however many years of experience our administrators and curriculum designers have, especially their expertise in their content area. But I think parents are having some concerns over the SAPL connections that are being introduced within those lessons. And I think we need to probably do a better job as a district informing our parents on sort of those, because everybody looks at things slightly differently.
Sure, and I'd be happy to ask Susan Bliss or Mary Hannah to come to the podium to talk a little bit more about SAPL. But just so that people have a good understanding, our SAPL is part of our elementary report cards. And so they're part of the K-5 elementary report cards. And so the parents actually get progress towards the SAPL framework that we utilize. Susan, do you want to speak a little bit more about SAPL? Come on up. I always like to bring the expert. But maybe just explain what SAPL is. It's a framework.
Sure. Yeah, I think, as many of you know, it's our social, academic, and personal learning framework. And the kinds of connections that we usually make as we go through the curriculum might be something like thinking about similarities and differences and helping kids to think about in culture how they might look at that. Thinking about empathy, and is there something in this particular course of study that might help with empathy? Helping the teachers to see that when they bring groups together, part of what's important is helping kids to learn how to have those social skills to be productive in groups, and that's a life skill. So just really highlighting for the teacher an opportunity. As you could see, it's a very, very small square. It really doesn't contain much. It's really that kind of thing where we're trying to highlight for the teacher opportunities to really reinforce our SAPL skills, which are self-regulation, self-management, self-awareness, decision-making and problem-solving. Does that help? There are other questions?
Other questions for Dr. Bliss? Penny, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to this incredible team of experts, because I've been on the board a long time, and people often ask me, how is it that New Canaan continues to improve? And I've thought, and I actually think, you know, it's teamwork. It's a strong teaching staff, it's a strong administration, it's a strong board. But I think that you all are sort of like the special sauce, the secret ingredient. You keep us all working in the same direction. You're incredibly passionate about your work. You've all been in front of us presenting many times. And, you know, I think a lot of districts are not fortunate enough to have the resources to do the kind of work that you all do, and then are able to pass on to our teachers and help them, you know, teach what you've created with fidelity. So, you know, I don't know, Jill, I just remember over the years hearing a lot of the statewide and national recognition that this team has gotten, if there's any more that you can remember off the top of your head. But, you know, I think it would be nice to share it with the public, because you all really do keep us improving every year. And I am so grateful for your work in doing that.
Thank you. Brendan.
I echo everything that Penny just said. In addition to that, and playing on a little bit of that, is you mentioned tri-state and how we interact, you know, with other districts and kind of evaluate ourselves. But can you talk a little bit about how we've, you know, either taken things from externally from other districts, and then, you know, helped other districts through evaluations, things like that?
So I would, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I know that, like as the Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, I'm constantly meeting with other deputy or assistant superintendents of curriculum and instruction. And we're constantly having conversations and dialogue about our units of study. We're having conversations about assessment. We're having conversations, you know, just about how we're moving forward, about teacher evaluation. And I know that the people that sit on CLC do the same. So I know that Melinda Meyer, for example, I'm sorry, Melinda, to call you out, but I know this morning that she was on the phone with the department chair from Darien. So they were calling over, asking about a particular area of interest, and then there's conversation that goes back and forth. I know that there's people that are constantly reaching out and having social studies. And then certainly our CES, which is our, you know, our cooperating education service, which is located in Trumbull, also then has social study council meetings. And so Bob Stevenson and Mary will attend the social studies council meeting. And they'll be there possibly sometimes meeting with someone from the state. And then they're talking with Steve Armstrong about the new course that they're going to be putting forth, or having conversations about the Connecticut Social Studies framework. So that just gives us a perspective of the network that we have just here within Lower Fairfield County, and then certainly at the state level as well.
Great, thank you.
Can I just add to that just very briefly? And it's, the last couple of years, it's been a little different because we haven't been on the visits and going to other districts. But as a member of the Tri-State Consortium, many of the members of the CLC and others in the district have been trained in the tri-state visit protocols, and they'll join teams to go spend 3 days or so taking a deep dive in other districts around essential questions that those districts have identified that they'd like some more information, some critical friend feedback on. So using the tri-state protocols that they've been trained in, bring that critical eye with a team of folks from other districts coming together for a couple of days. And we invite them in here as well to come and take a look at our science program and take a good look at that, or sometimes look at questioning in the classrooms. Like, are there questions leading to to an understanding of where our students are in a way that we can then, you know, sort of adjust and adapt and continue to teach them well. So, you know, that membership in Tri-State is very valuable, and is another way that we both share our expertise, but also have critical friends come in from time to time to help us to continue to learn and grow. And again, we haven't been on a visit in the last 3 school years now because of COVID, but we look forward to getting back to that as well.
Bob, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Jill, this is great. One of the questions I had especially after listening to Cabe talk about the state sort of developing curriculum, I was wondering why, or is there a way that districts across the state can share these types of curriculum maps and content with each other, so I guess a sort of a community resource across the state, as opposed to, like, why would the state write it if we have 169 districts that probably put together really good content? Why would they get in the business of writing content?
They're all giggling back here.
Yeah.
And I think that some of it goes back to just probably the time and the resources that it takes to develop the curriculum. And so I think when Mrs. McCarthy was speaking, I think she was talking a little bit about the expertise and the resources that it takes to develop curriculum. And I think some of the smaller districts just don't have that, or some of the larger districts don't have that. And I think that's part of why we go to like a social studies council meeting to share some of our curriculum, share some of our assessments. It really depends on what the nature of that workshop is. And once again, my guess is that some of the answer to your question is probably time. It's just big time commitments to all come together. But you're right, to be able to share some of what we've done is amazing. But our CLC is very proud, and they have a little intellectual property as well, because they've developed it from scratch.
Sure.
And so there is that, we have to protect that intellectual property as well.
No, I get that, and I kind of didn't want to say it because of that, right? Like, but I was curious because, it sounds like they're putting resources into it, and it doesn't make sense, really.
Right, but that doesn't mean that we don't help out a district that calls us. We always are willing to support. We've actually shared our effective teaching framework many times with many districts. And many of the districts will contact me directly to say, I heard that you have an actual framework where the counselors have their own framework and they don't have to follow the teacher framework, or your psychologist or your speech and language. And so oftentimes they'll call and say, would you be willing to share that? And of course I do.
Yeah, and even in that example, even with the state itself and the commissioner, and going through and sharing with them the way that we evaluate teachers and that whole TEPL document. Because sometimes something like that, we feel it's better than what's out there for sure. And we want to share that information and try to move in that direction.
And that's not to say that the state doesn't call upon these people. They know who they are, and so oftentimes they do call upon them to sit on committees at the state level.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
I'm just expecting a test. And 3 credits in
All right.
curriculum design.
All right, anybody who can tell me what the GRASP acronym stands for? No. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Dr. Correnti, thank you from all of us. We really appreciate you taking the time to pull this together.
And if it's okay with you, as I'm heading back to the table, if we can let all these people go home,
Yes.
because they all have to be here very early tomorrow to instruct our students.
Yes.
Or
And-
attend a
and-
PPT, or run a PLC, or whatever it might be.
And I think the rain has stopped, so I would,
Run.
yeah, I would
thank
advise
you.
moving quickly.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
you all.
Thank you all for being here. Have a good night. Okay, moving on with our reports. Next is an update on our School Start Implementation Committee that met last week. So, Dr. Lutzy, do you want to kick that off?
I will be
With
glad
the
to.
help of the cabinet, and there were some board members in
And-
attendance as well. So Deanna and Penny and myself were all there, and so please chime in and add comments as needed. I might just add, I was going to say it later, but I'll just say it now. I think from the board's perspective, as we talk through this, I might try and suggest we think about it through, as we move to this decision, and each of you can comment on what your views are in terms of implementation timing. But that the lens we look at this through tonight is really about what we feel sets the district up for success. What is the most successful path? The best path towards successful implementation. So unless you have other thoughts, I would suggest that that's how we approach this and use that as our guide for our discussion tonight.
That's great. So I'll be quick. On Thursday on morning outside on Hawes Plaza, we had 27 folks come together to have a conversation. We met at 9 o'clock in the morning. We had some parents, Board of Ed members, as you said. Penny, Deanna, and Katrina were all there. We had administrators. We had representatives from the health department. Janet Reed was there. We had teachers represented, visual performing arts, athletics, transportation. So it was a wide range of folks. We also had representatives from through the preschools and after-school programs as well, with Playland, the YMCA, and the Nature Center, New Canaan Nature Center. So we put. Oh, First Press. That's right. Joanne. We had 4 people.
My
That's
alma
right.
mater.
I still, I think of Joanne as the assistant principal over at West still. So, Joanne LaVista. So we had a range of perspectives, which is exactly what we needed in order to kick off the discussion. And we, just for what it's worth, we started by talking just briefly about the book, Adam Grant book, Think Again, which I know board members have, and talked about how we generally, his opening premise, how we generally approach conversations like this as either a preacher, a politician, or a prosecutor. Either we're advocating a position, attacking someone for their position, or we're trying to horse trade in order to bring people to our beliefs. And we said that's not the goal here, and that's not how we're going to get to where we need to be. We need to think like scientists, as Grant says. So talking about using data and trying to be dispassionate about the position, focus on the information, and build towards the result that you need. So that's how we sort of framed it out. So after that, and we all sat together in a circle, Roy gave a quick update on transportation, which I think is important to share to the board, again, very quickly. When what he shared essentially is that in a meeting with DATCO just a couple of days before, they confirmed that the timing of the board could drive their decisions and their actions, and they can be flexible enough to meet either an April or an August timeline, August, September, the start of the 22 school year. The buses are on order, but if they weren't to get here on time, they could give us some of the diesel buses that they have. They're already scaling up with their drivers, and they'd get the drivers trained and on board. And we know there's a driver shortage, so they would get them trained and ready, but then use them elsewhere until we're ready to implement. So they affirmed that they'll be ready, which I think is very important. Roy's also been working, of course, with DATCO to help train the drivers and get them on board because of that, both that shortage and the anticipation that we're going to be expanding our fleet in order to meet the time constraints of the new start and end times, regardless of when that begins. So we're going to need the additional buses. So then what the group did, which I'll just share a couple of pieces of feedback, we individually created kind of a T-chart to do pros and cons of an April implementation versus a September, August implementation. And wanted to do that with the group because of the variety of perspectives there, thinking that it would be very helpful. And I guess I should just back up a little just to share that the scope of the committee, this implementation committee, the membership is meant to be fluid, and it's meant to meet as needed and be flexible so others can be invited. Of course, all the board members are always invited to attend. And we'll have other folks coming in based on what the discussion is going to be. But the idea is to get ideas, to brainstorm certain things, to problem solve some things, to think about different work streams that need to happen in order to be as prepared as possible when the time comes, because of the understanding, again, that when changing school start times doesn't just impact the schools, but impacts the entire ecosystem in which the schools operate, right? That's the home life, that's the after school, the before school, everything else that goes along with it, which is why we're looking at adjusting school start times in the first place, right? To help fix that ecosystem and make it a healthier ecosystem for all of our kids. So again, the group is not a decision-making body, but it's really an advisory body for the board. And ultimately, again, it's the board who makes the decisions around when start and end times for schools. So with that sort of as the charge, and then we sort of centered around the conversation, as I said, we went into making the T-charts, and then got together in pairs to share it back and forth of different perspectives, and then went around and share it as a whole, as a group. And you have the draft minutes in front of you around that. I know that we just sort of got them together this afternoon, but you see that, again, the reproduction of those T-charts. Folks handed in their notes, although they didn't know they were going to in the beginning. And we did our best to put it all together. And you can see, like, for instance, For April implementation, the first pro is that it allows for a trial run to work out issues prior to the start of the new school year. 13 folks there had that, something like that on their list. That's the X13. And a con is that it may be hard for teachers and parents to find and adjust their child care mid-year based on a change, right? So, and 10 people had that, and that's the X10. Right, so I think there's just a few things that you might kind of be able to assume would be there. There's some things that I think are important because they came from perspectives certainly other than mine, because I haven't operated a daycare before or an after-school program. So just to hit a couple of highlights, again, some of the pro for the April was students would receive the health benefits sooner, right? And there's certainly an urgency to do that. More time for reflection and adjustment to be able to refine it, so sort of trying it out as a pilot, having the elementary schools on the same schedule sooner. And the very last bullet from the perspective of the Nature Center was they could have one start time for all of their programs because right now, they're staggering their start times because of the schedule we're in for their after-school program. On the, again, sort of the cons, disadvantages of that April start, changes to kids' schedules. We do know kids are creatures of habit. They do like their routines and some predictability in there. Challenges with shifting activities and programming mid-year, so the activities that kids are in. A big challenge is drivers would have to unlearn their current routes and relearn new routes, which, the significance of the change we're making, we're not just tweaking routes, where drivers will be in entirely new routes. And some of our drivers have been driving the same route for 10, 20 years, longer maybe. So I worry a little, I don't know about you, I'm driving sometimes and I pull in the wrong, my driveway instead of going where I was planning to go. I worry about our drivers sort of falling back into those habits. So they do need some time to relearn. And if you look again at the bottom from the after-school programming, these two, I think, were important. Hard to staff those after-school community programs with the shift in the middle, and having to issue refunds for items or programs that families have already purchased, and that was two. So again, the financial model, I think, could be challenged for that implementation. But again, in those that were there, there was really rich conversation around all of this. The September implementation, pro to starting in September, was it's a new year and it's a new routine and you get right into it and you're not necessarily changing, mid-year. It's what you gear up for on the first day. So it's, instead of being kind of 1 week and then shifting, you have the summer to prepare and you gear up for that. A con, of course, is it's another year before we start to recognize the health benefits for our kids and build those new routines. There's more time for our staff to plan if we did it in the start of the year instead of mid-year. More time for families to plan, students and families having this full summer to get ready. Hiring, and Darlene had mentioned this a little bit around the employees and hiring staff and bringing folks in where they know what the times are going to be. So again, it makes that planning a little bit better that way. The bottom two, again, those community partners that are so good with our kids. Staffing for community centers would be better since the staff would know the schedule for the year. So instead of that, then possibly losing staff and having to find some others. Pricing for the community centers would be smoother because, again, they could plan all of that out. Some of the cons, again, 2 more months of the middle school to high school students waking up early. And again, we know we've got some students that have to wake up well before 6 o'clock to be ready on that bus for, a 6:28 pickup and those things. So we do need to address that. New drivers could be a con. I'm not sure why that would be a con. I'll leave that alone. And then there was a feeling that it might cause more anxiety for students since it's a bigger change at the beginning of the school year. But I think that one of the things I've learned in my experience is that change is hard no matter what, but often it's the duration of change instead of the intensity of change. So I do worry a little about making a change in April and then coming back into the new year as the new year starts. And I think that, I think there are lots of, again, pros and cons as you heard in the conversation. So the group did not come and say we recommend X or Y. But I think that, I think the feedback here is helpful. I hope to see some of those perspectives and some of what folks had to say. For us, for me, it would be good to get some direction from the board as far as the April or the September start, because just as Dr. Cranty mentioned or talked about developing curriculum, when you're doing any project of this scope, you begin with the end and you map backwards. So if we're mapping backwards from April, then we need to know that. If we're mapping backwards from September, we need to do that. Our next step is to engage with a few other external partners to assure that whenever we begin, anyone who is looking for after or before school childcare can get it. And we have a partner that we've been talking to, and I look to, in this next month in October, to have them over to meet with the implementation committee, talk about the services that they can provide, and to work, continue doing the work around the before and after school, because I do think that, I know that that's a significant driver in all of this, a significant concern that people have, and a legitimate one. And if I missed anything for folks that were there.
Yeah,
or
thank you.
anything
I'll see in a minute if Penny or Deanna, if you want to add anything. The one comment I would add is that it was a very rich discussion. I found it extremely helpful to hear the insights from all of the stakeholders within the community, and also the parents. They had different perspectives at different age levels, and I think they said a couple of things that, perspectives that I hadn't heard before, so that was helpful to hear. And certainly the preschool and aftercare, before and after care providers, that was valuable input, I felt, to offer a perspective on just, the impact on logistics and their own programs. I think that's an important element for our consideration. So those were two standouts for me. Penny or Deanna, do you have anything to add to that? Penny?
The only thing I'd say, Dr. Lutzy, is just to review what our new start times are, because people have been asking me, and I think there might still be some confusion out there in the community. And we actually did that at the meeting.
We
at the
did,
very beginning.
because
So
it's one of those things where I'm so deep in it that I think everyone
Right.
knows everything that I know. So the start times that we're talking about
Right.
aligns our 3 elementary schools at 8 o'clock in the morning for their bell to ring and their school day to start. It moves our grades 7 through 12 to an 8:30 start for them. And so they would start at 8:30 and go through their day. And then right now it's our 5th and 6th grade are on the 3rd tier. And right now they're at 9:15, and we're looking at kind of their ways that we can try to scoot that back a little closer to 9 o'clock. The day is 6 hours and 30 minutes long. So an 8 o'clock start would mean a 2:30 dismissal, right? An 8:30 start would be a 3 o'clock dismissal, and then the 9:45 and 3:45, or 9:15 and 3:45. So with the 6.5-hour day, by grouping them the way that we are, we're aligning the 3 elementary schools on that same tier. We are shifting it, to 8 o'clock as the start. So really, again, not to go too far, but as you know, the start times are really in some ways less important than the pickup times. So we look to make sure that no students picked up before 7:10 in the morning. And we know right now we have students that are getting picked up at 6:28, 6:30 in order to make that high school time. So we look to pick up that much time, which is pretty significant. By moving the half hour, we're able to actually move that first pickup 40 minutes because of having the neighborhood schools going first. Those are shorter bus runs, so there's just less road to travel to get the kids to their school. So we're able to shorten those trips. And really, less than half of the kids are picked up before 7:35, if I recall. So you're really the furthest out, the earliest would be, I think, after 7:10. But you're not hitting critical mass until you're more like 7:25 or so, 7:35 as you're going. So that, again, the shift, and that's why the advantage of having those guys first. 7 through 12 sort of have to go together because of the limitations of the Saks facility. You can't have 5 through 8 on the same tier. We've looked at it so many times, and you can't move that many kids into that building with the way that it's laid out, and just, the access in. So you put 7 and 8 with 9 through 12. 9 through 12 doesn't have nearly as many riders, so you're able to group those together. If you do the middle school, it has the most riders because of the ages of the kids and what have you, so you just can't put them all together. So that's why we group them the way that we do.
Deanna?
So I guess, my big takeaways, and it was a really robust conversation, and, lots to think about, and, be communicative with the community, whatever we decide to do. But I think the things that stood out for me were really Joanne and Roy's comment about the real operational challenge of a week to transition between one starts time and another with our bus drivers, and to really, and they were both like, we will do whatever you want to do as a board, we'll implement whatever you said, but there is concern that a 1 week transition to this could lead to some operational challenges, and you're transporting kids, and we want to have an amazing rollout of whatever we do. Like, you don't want it to be with a lot of snafus and a lot of problems. So that stood out to me. And also, and there's things we talked about when we talked about this April implementation, but real challenges for our community partners, real challenges, and really our teachers. We've asked a lot of our teachers over the last 19 months, 20 months, and we're asking them to shift their childcare and their commuting schedule at a very non-traditional time. So those are the things that stood out to me.
Thank you. Yep. Brendan.
Yeah, I was not there, but I can tell from these pros and cons, that there's clearly some concern about starting in April. To me, it's really important. We spent so much time evaluating, the pros and cons of making a change and what kind of change do we want to make, refining the schedule. And so to me, if we're going to do something, it has to be, done really carefully, purposefully, and we really need to have buy-in from, not only the New Canaan Public School community, but the entire community. Make sure that we have, clear communication to families about before and after school programs, make sure that that happens, many months in advance. It's probably, getting tight for April. And it is a tough time in the year to make that shift. So, to me, it's tough because, I really would love to see the change, frankly, this past September. And I would love to see it in April, but at the same time, I know that if we don't do it the right way, if we don't do it carefully, it could just as easily go away. That would really be a disaster, given how much time we've spent and what we think the benefits are. Those are my thoughts.
Yep. Thanks. Other thoughts, comments, questions? Jen? And then we'll go to Pat.
I agree with Brendan. I know that when we battled with this decision for years, and in the spring when we voted it in, one of the big comments that was made was like, we will not do this unless we do it right, and we know it's going to be a success. And again, I wasn't at the meeting. Sorry, I couldn't attend that. But just from seeing all this, and I think that's something that's very, very important before we make this decision. Like, if it's not going to be done the way we want it to be done, then we should wait for sure. And then the staffing is definitely another issue. I get like it would be hard for teachers to change things, and we wouldn't want to lose any of our amazing teachers or staff because they've got to choose between like their job or their kids and things like that. So those are just my thoughts.
Pat?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. I was not part of all the discussion in the past. I know you guys all have gone through this and the vote and everything else, but couldn't emphasize that, when talking to people in the community, how important the execution has to be. And just in addition to staffing, Deanna touched on this, but in Connecticut and elsewhere, all you read about is the bus driver shortages all over the place. And is that really something it's not a problem? I know you said they're hiring 10 here, but that seems really to be an issue elsewhere. So just logistically.
It's an enormous issue elsewhere. You've got Massachusetts calling out the National Guard to drive buses.
Right.
You've got some other things. Our relationship with our provider, with DADCO, and their value of us, as a client, and the relationship we've had over the years that we've had them. And we're really a desirable district for drivers. They want to drive in New Canaan. So all those things combine to help us, and part of this is, again, even when we went through the shutdown back in 2020, we really reached out to them directly, had really good conversations with them, and sort of, kept that relationship strong, where most tried to, win another way. So I think that helps us a lot. We've got this is sort of, part of this is power of relationships, and we've got a really strong professional relationship with them. So it's Good for us. Mhm.
Sherry?
So I just want to first say that I'm steadfast in supporting the Healthy Start Times. But I agree with the comments that are made that we need to make sure that we can execute and ensure a successful implementation. There is a long list of cons to the April implementation. Deanna's points are well taken about the operational challenges with a week turnaround and the teacher scheduling challenges. But I am mindful and concerned about the town's funding commitment to this. We did include half-year implementation costs this year to get us going. So I think that if we move forward and decide that we cannot address all of these cons and ensure a successful execution, that we need to really be clear and strong in our ongoing commitment to addressing Healthy Start Times next year. That's, we all need to stand firm on that commitment as a board.
I would completely agree with that, and I think that's part of the process, is having that conversation with the town boards after we make our decision, and hopefully, getting a sense of, I know there's no final commitment until the budget's approved, but I agree with you. Brendan?
Yeah, I wanted to echo that, and also, I know we don't at all control the entities outside the New Canaan Public Schools, but I think having, as part of our communications to the public, try to have those organizations like the Nature Center and the Y, talk to parents, talk to the community about what they may offer, starting in the fall, if it is starting in the fall, and, gather feedback and input and, start to make people feel like they're, comfortable with the change, feel like they'll have a place to send their kids, before or after school, and as families talk to each other about what, various friends and other kids are doing, I think they'll gain comfort with it. So I think the sooner that happens, the more support there'll be and the more comfort there'll be with the change. And I totally agree as it relates to the town. It's obviously something not obviously, but just to remind people, this is the third year, I think. This will be the third year that we tried to, get this implemented. And it's been a long haul, and I wouldn't want, the town to step away from something that, we all have spent a lot of time on and we all view as really important.
Bob? Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I agree with everything everybody said here. I think, one of the things we have to really concentrate on is over communicating to the community. I think that's really important, whether it's an April or a fall date, so that they really understand what's going on. And, I think, and I'm not sure is there a list of meeting dates that'll come out for this committee? Because I think this committee is the key to making the execution work. And
There's not at this point, but we were talking about doing that at the next time this group gets together.
Okay.
And putting those dates out so folks have them well in advance.
Yeah, it'd be good so that, whether it's board members or whoever could try to plan to be at the meetings or make sure that they can put aside time to get to the meetings, because I think, it's the community part that really need to be super involved in this upfront work to make it really work well. So I think that, so that would be my suggestions, and just let's get the dates on the calendar so we can attend, and then really over communicate overall about this committee, and then about the rollout when we decide to push it out there.
Yep, and we're going to put these minutes up on the start time website that we have, and we'll use that as a way to put up the list of meeting dates and things like that too. Yep, good.
Penny?
So I actually have full confidence in this school district that we could do everything that we needed to do with the April implementation. But the issues that sort of came up were the things that we can't, and I actually think we could get the bus drivers there. I really do. I would not put, if we put this off to September, I think our bus drivers could be great. We could plan them. Roy is amazing, and their commitment to the district has been terrific. But there are elements of this change that, we can't control because it relates to all the other organizations in town. I think whatever we decide as a school board, we need to do this quickly, and we need to be unwavering in our commitment to these new start times, and that they're an important part of, what we see is the education going forward, and not something to be relitigated in budgets or in discussions. And so if we decide to change this schedule, I think we should sketch out at the exact same time, like what our meeting schedule is, when our meetings are going to be, and we can always change that if we have to, but I think we need to, not, I would suggest that the committee, come up with a plan, and then we'll just start rolling it forward. Because this is the board that understands what has to be done. And no matter what happens in November, there are going to be some new faces. And I think it's, like, we've done all this hard work, and I think it's up to us to sort of sketch it out, what we think has to happen for the rollout to be successful. And then I think we're providing a good roadmap for whoever is sitting here to do it and to make it the terrific change that it will be, I think, for the students of the district.
Brendan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think we should, if not tonight, maybe it's the next meeting where we, outline what our plan is, make a call on what we're doing from a timing standpoint, and really get it out there to the community.
Yeah, agreed. I think that is work of the implementation committee in terms of just outlining areas to focus on and when, and setting priorities in terms of, from beginning, middle, and end, whatever timing we decide. So I agree, and I think those are good next steps. So I think we've heard from all of you. The sense I'm taking here is that everyone seems to be supportive or in favor of a September implementation. I know there are some reservations that some of them well outlined in the pros and cons that we discussed, but it seems to be that is where there's some energy. Does anyone disagree or have other concerns or comments they would share? This is the time.
I'm not there yet, but I'm
Okay.
sensing that other people are.
Okay.
I honestly just think this, we should have implemented this in 2019. So it's been a long time coming, and my concern is that delay leads to somehow it doesn't get done. And I think that would be such a bad outcome for the school district. So I'm happy to go along with it. That's what everybody else wants. But I do think we need a really detailed roadmap, not just sort of what we're going to do. I think we need it step by step so that there is no guesswork here, no additional work that somebody new coming in has to do.
So part of what I'm hearing perhaps is trying to get together somehow as a board in a workshop we've had 4 or so workshops, maybe more, on school start times that have gotten us to this point. Maybe we need, whether it's before our next meeting for an hour or something, an opportunity to just sort of a working meeting instead of a business meeting to try to do what you're talking about. And maybe the implementation committee can meet prior to that to give some recommendations and get a sense of things and try to nail those things down. Does that seem like
That would be good.
an approach that could work? Yeah.
Jen?
Sad that it would be, I know it's maybe not tonight, but maybe in that workshop, Brian, that maybe you can be able to tell us, like, is this execution, are you confident that this execution, to the best of your knowledge, is that you're ready? Because I think that's a big, we have a ton of faith in this district, and again, like Penny said, I wish it was already implemented, but it's not, but we want to make sure we're doing it right. We don't want to rush it just to have it done and have it not done right. So I guess maybe, whenever we meet, that would be an important.
Well, yeah, I think that one of the things for us to really have a sense of is it April or the September, right? Because we have to map backwards from that. That's going to help us figure these things out. And what I didn't necessarily see here, but I do think is still a factor, and I wish it wasn't, I think we all do, is our time still is eaten up by COVID quite a bit, right? You heard Patrice mention it. Yep, she's right. I'm not getting emails every day now from the State Department. I'm getting them 3 times a week. But I'm still on calls, almost daily around something or other. And if it's, it's a good day when I'm not on one of those calls, right? So that is still a factor, and we're hoping that we work through. But, when we even talked about it being in April, we were optimistic that we wouldn't be still dealing with some of these things, right? So we need to keep pushing ourselves, and we keep doing that, and we've done that with our goals and everything else. I think that's the right approach as a district and as a management team and as a board to continue to do that, but we also want to be realistic about the challenges that are in front of us. So it's not going away in the very short term. So that is a factor in just flat out ability and time.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I would add that just the ongoing uncertainty around that, the bus environment. There's enough uncertainty between now and April that it places a solid implementation at risk. And I think that's what's kind of I keep coming back to is, you know, we want to do this. We want to get this right for our kids. So when we do it, the benefit's there, and we stay the course, and you know, we don't look back. So I think hopefully.
I mean, a good example is the weekly testing mandate for any unvaccinated staff, right? I mean, just that alone, that which we were working towards anyway, but that's 5 to 15 hours a week of follow-up and communications, and that's Saturdays, that's Sundays at the portal. It's just, you know, there's a lot, and so we just want to be cognizant of all of what's happening.
One question, is this committee doing more work, or is that all, are we basing our decision on that data? Is that it? You know what I'm saying? Like, is
Sure.
this implementation committee doing more work to get us more data from the community prior to making this decision about April, or is that it?
I think that this is where they stood, and we closed it out here to share this feedback with you around the April versus the start.
Got it. Okay.
You could ask for more, and we could go back and do, but I think this was, for this group and that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's tonight's goal to provide direction to the administration on the timing, so really, so we can communicate to the district what the
I get
plan
it. I
is.
just wasn't
Yeah.
sure if they were done. I
Yeah.
thought there was more fact-finding happening.
Right, if you had to wait for more follow-up, you want to do
Yeah.
that. Yep, that
Good.
makes sense.
Okay. Brendan? Okay. Okay, so I think
I'm getting a sense that September
September.
is, as we look at it and have to map this backwards and put this in place, and, we do that and have that communication going from there. Okay, it's very
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your comments. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, that's a good
So-
segue right into COVID.
Yeah, I
update,
guess
'cause
it
we
is.
just got
right?
a little
And
bit
there-
of one.
I just shared it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you really don't. So I think you just got it. I wanted to share a brief update about you saw what I sent out yesterday to the community, and so don't need to rehash all of that, just simply to share with you that we are across the district 94% vaccinated. That's all in on all of our employees. So we are doing very well, but that does mean that there's 6% that are testing weekly right now. The weekly testing has already prompted some others to begin the vaccination process, which will help, but it does take a number of weeks, because anyone who's not fully vaccinated is required to test weekly. The test must be taken Thursday on the week before. It gets uploaded into a portal by 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, which then we go through and make sure everybody has, and those who haven't, we communicate with, we do everything we can to try to help them if they're waiting for results or whatever. But ultimately, if we don't have a test from an unvaccinated person, then they are placed on unpaid administrative leave starting on that Monday until they do test, and they're able to come back. And that is following the requirements of the executive order. It's a system that we've built and we've put in place, so we have the portal. They're able to upload the results very quickly. And as you saw, anyone who is vaccinated, we've collected both their vaccination cards and an attestation from the state that it is authentic and it is their card. So these are, there's some forms from the state, there's some things that we've developed internally. We're working out the kinks in the system, but it's working well. It is, and we've had a couple here and there, but it's working well. The other piece to it is around, of course, the travel guidelines that we have. As you probably recall, last year, Connecticut issued its own travel advisory that they expected people to follow, and really were pretty directive around that if you were traveling for over 24 hours outside of the tri-state area. Now they don't have a specific advisory for Connecticut, but they do ask people to follow the CDC guidelines. But of course, as you saw, not every trip is the same, not every family composition is the same. We've got, some families are fully vaccinated, some aren't, different things like that. So it's not a mandate, so to speak, but we do hope that folks, if they think about the trip that they have to travel, and their children who are unvaccinated, and they are in an area of potential exposure, that they follow those CDC guidelines and do that. We as a town have been doing very well. Our numbers look good. The positivity rate is relatively low. And it has to do, again, with the community and the steps they're taking and the vaccination and all of the work that everyone's doing together. But we also know that can turn quickly, so we have to stay vigilant with it all.
Great. Thank you for the update.
Is that short enough? Okay.
We're going to move now to any comments from the public. Any, yep.
Hi, again, Heather Moore. I really don't do well off the cuff, but I'm gonna try. I completely understand that there's not much difference between April implementation and September. It's 6 weeks. Kids will not be implemented, or not be affected largely either way. What I feel like, though, is that this board, as it stands now, can only guarantee an April implementation. I don't have faith that this board, as it stands now, can say this is definitely going to happen in September. There are a lot of big things happening in the next few months. There are elections coming up, and there's another budget cycle. So what I'm hoping is that maybe you can provide some sort of just assurance that if it doesn't happen in April, fine, again, I get it. How do you guarantee that it is going to happen next year? Speaking on behalf of, hundreds of parents who have been, I think, waiting pretty patiently. We want to cooperate. We want to do what's best for everybody, including the administration and our kids and the teachers. But how do you now go forward and guarantee that this will happen in September when, hopefully not, but half this board could be different in 6 months? Don't know if you can address that now, but hopefully in your conversations you can think about how do we make sure it happens whenever it happens. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. Announcements and future business.
Yep, so 2 weeks from today, we have our next Board of Education meeting, and we have a lot of work to do between now and then. Oh. So we have our next meeting 2 weeks from tonight, and looks like we'll work to have our implementation committee meeting and try to figure out where best to put an opportunity for the board to workshop this a little bit together. So we'll be working on those things and getting back to you.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we have a motion to adjourn to executive session in accordance with Connecticut General Statute 1-225A. The subjects to be discussed are collective bargaining and contract negotiations. Penny, second. Jen, all in favor? Okay, all hands are up. All right,
Great, thanks.
thank you.